thing I could use some help on for those of you that might be willing. Anybody know how to use a screwdriver? Okay, well, you're all qualified and ready to go then. One of the things that we have here at the church is a bunch of plastic molded chairs that have a frame, you know, a steel frame, I guess, wood or whatever frame on the bottom of it, aluminum, whatever it might be. I went to a classroom the other day and I started to move the chair and I picked the back of it up and started to move and the bottom fell off. And I began to look around the room and there were about 40 chairs in that room that all had loose screws. What I would like to do is bring in a group of guys with their screw guns, their screwdrivers. We'll provide the screws to go in it or tighten the ones, just tighten all the screws on all these dang chairs in the building. And we can start on one floor and go to the next or whatever. But I just envision this whole horde of people with screwdrivers just going at it all day long for one day, if we could. So if you would be willing to do that, if you would let your table leader know, whoever you designate that to be this morning, I'd love to have your names and we'll get it together. But it's that time of year when we begin to bring groups back in, and a lot of activities going on. So if you'd be willing to help us out, that would be wonderful. And we might even have a couple of teams going, but if we could all do it at one time, that'd be great. It'd be a fun thing to do. And I've already challenged Nihar with figuring out how many screws we need. So we'll see with that. But anyway, that'd be another fun thing to do together. This morning, we're picking up with where we left off last week. If you remember in the 13th chapter of Luke, we did the fig thing last week and trying to figure out whether you chop down a tree or whether you let it be dormant for a while or how quickly fruit comes to it. And this week we're continuing in the 13th chapter of Luke, and we're into the 10th through the 17th verses. Don't know where that came from, but anyway, must be the burrito or something. I don't know. Thank you, Scott, for that. So anyway, want to begin the 13th or the 10th through the 17th verses this morning. Now, when he was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath, and just then there appeared a woman with a spirit that had been crippled, that had crippled her for 18 years. I just had a whole bottle of water, so I don't know where this is coming from. Let me put in a stop the recording. So, all right, let me put this in my mouth. Maybe that'll help. All right, a woman that had been crippled for 18 years. She had bent over and was quite unable to stand straight. When Jesus saw her, he called her over and said, "Woman, you are set free from your ailment." When he had laid his hands on her, immediately she stood up straight and began to praise God. But the leader of the synagogue, indignant because Jesus had cured on the Sabbath, kept saying to the crowd, "There are 6 days on which work ought to be done. Come on those days and be cured, and not on the Sabbath day." But the Lord answered him and said, "You hypocrites, does not each of you on the Sabbath untie his ox or his donkey from the manger and lead it away to give it water? And ought not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, who Satan bound for 18 long years, be set free from the bondage on the Sabbath day?" When he said this, all his opponents were put to shame. And the entire crowd was rejoicing with all the wonderful things he was doing. Did your mother ever tell you to stand up straight? My grandmother was a real stickler on this. In fact, she said when you sat in a chair, you never put the back of your back up against the back of the chair. You always were just a little far away from the back so you didn't have the temptation to slip down into the seat. Don't slouch was another thing that she said. And in fact, when I was with my mom in hospice one day, she looked at me, she said, "Stand up straight." And I said, "Yes, ma'am," and I did with that. So, we do those things, but it's important that we stand up straight. And it's amazing to us, I think, how at times with all the activities of life and all the things that are going on for us, that they begin, I had a massage one time and I didn't realize how tense I really was. The individual that was doing it said, "Man, this is tough." And I said, "Well, I didn't even realize it." And there's a lot of times that the weight of the things that we carry with us begin to pull upon us. Gravity does that by nature, but it just seems the more we have on us, the more tense we are, the more that we carry with us, then the more we tend to slouch over. So we're familiar, and we know that times that we need to just kind of make sure that everything's in line and get that back up to where we're standing straight and tall. And part of this experience is what we have in the story today, obviously. This crippled woman who has come to hear Jesus in the temple. The best we can tell, this woman doesn't know Jesus. She's never had an encounter with him in any kind before. There's no mention that this is a repeat visitor to him. So we don't know that if she came, the assumption is she was at the synagogue a lot and she was there all the time. But maybe she just heard Jesus was coming. Maybe she heard a little something about this man and what he had done for others, or the fact that he was a wonderful teller of God's story to the people. Whatever it was, he allowed others to come, and just hordes of people tend to come is what the implication is. So today it starts off in verse 10 and says, "Now he was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath." So where's Jesus? He's in the Sabbath. How many of you know in the past when Jesus teaches in the Sabbath, something not so great is going to happen? Somebody is not going to be happy. And it's almost like those old suspense movies that you would see, and, kind of a horror flick thing. And you go into the house and you're watching it. And if you've ever been in a theater like this and whatnot, and the person goes up to pull the knob to open the door, and you're going, "No, don't open that door. Don't open that door." Well, maybe it's like Jesus. Don't go to the synagogue, Jesus. All it's going to be is trouble for you. Let's just stay away. But he doesn't. He always goes to the synagogue. And when he was allowed, he was willing to teach and to share with them. So, but the interesting thing about this particular event of going to the synagogue, in the Gospel of Luke, this is the last time Jesus goes to the synagogue, a synagogue. He goes to the temple when he gets to Jerusalem, but this is the last time. No more in the Gospel of Luke will we hear the words, "and he was going to," or "he was teaching in the synagogue." This is the last time. And so he's on his way to Jerusalem. And so this offers the opportunity to have this one last time there. "And just then there appeared a woman," in the 11th verse, "with a spirit that had crippled her for 18 years. She was bent over and was quite unable to stand up straight." It appears that this woman has some kind of degenerative spinal problem, some kind of condition like a stenosis or a scoliosis, or something that does not allow her to stand. And over time, maybe she has become more and more bent over. Atrophy has hit her and she's not able to stand up. And we have had some members of this congregation that's been the case. And the longer they went, the more bent over they became. And they still came, they were still active, and they were still involved, but it was very challenging and difficult to get around. And some of us are short enough that we've experienced the times when we just weren't quite tall enough to see things or whatever. But can you imagine basically living your life. So what you're seeing is the tops of people's feet, the tops of people's shoes, or you have to turn sideways to look up, whatever it might be. This woman has experienced that. And so there's a physiological reason that we're really not sure why she has this condition. But that seems to be a secondary issue in this, because it says that she is bent over and crippled because of a spiritual issue. And Jesus goes on to talk about that maybe Satan has had something to do with this. Satan has touched her, and this is the reason she is in the position that she is in. For 18 years, she has had this. Now, 18 years is a long time. 18 years is a long time to be bent over. The woman appears to be a believer because she is in the synagogue, but for some reason she has become demon possessed. And it's a fascinating thing that this woman is in the synagogue on a Sabbath day. We've all known people that have had challenges in their life, and when they get those, they begin to search for the reasons why. They begin to say, this is something that I have been given. It's not something maybe natural. It's something that I've been given. It's something that I don't appreciate. And we have had people that have turned, instead of toward the church and their faith, they have turned away. They have decided that this is punishment, or this is something they didn't deserve, or this is something that God has laid upon them that is unfair. And maybe we have been caught in that a little bit before. Maybe sometimes those tapes begin to play in our own head that the things that are happening to me in my life are happening because of something I did or something I did not do. And so this woman is there. And she's not saying, how could a God who supposedly loves people and loves me allows this to happen? I guess we have the mindset that everything's supposed to be perfect in our lives. And if it's not perfect, it's either something God has done for us or to us, and allowed to happen. This is where this woman is. She's coming to the synagogue, even in the midst of her ailment. In the 12th verse, when Jesus saw her, he called her over and said, "Woman, you are set free from your ailment." Interesting. Why do you think God or Jesus called her over instead of going over to her? What's the significance of that? What's that? We all have to approach God. Jesus called lots of folks to him. And while he went to them, it seems like this is just one of those puzzling things. Why is it that this woman who is crippled, instead of him going to her, he calls her forward? Maybe it was due to the circumstances that they were in, maybe the way the room was set up, whatever it might be. But it seems like maybe he is calling her to do something. Maybe he is calling her to exercise her faith. Maybe it's to touch it, reach out and touch her in a way that she is responding in faith. And so maybe that's what's behind that. Then we get to the 13th verse. And when he had laid his hands on her, immediately she stood up straight and began doing what? Praising God. Now, you could just picture this, can't you? She's glorifying God, and I'm sure everyone else in the room is just ecstatic that this is happening. No. The people are, we think, but not really. You would think there would be rejoicing by everybody, but it's not. Jesus has no problem ministering to this woman's need. He shows complete mastery over demons, sickness, and disease. But yet not everybody's thrilled about this. Because in the 14th verse, but the leader of the synagogue, indignant because Jesus has cured on the Sabbath, kept saying to the crowd, there are 6 days on which work ought to be done. Come on those days and be cured, and not on the Sabbath day. Don't mess up what we're doing right now. We have a service planned today. Don't do anything to disrupt the plan that we have. So come, but not today. Everything is wonderful. But what about the synagogue leader? You know, what's going on here? Indignation. What does that mean? To be indignant. What does that mean? What? You're one up. But the response is what? Anger. Anger has arisen by something that is considered unjust or unworthy or mean. There's contempt that's implied. Something that's unmerited is what this guy's upset about. So the leader is offended that Jesus healed on the Sabbath in his synagogue. The leader said to the crowd, there are 6 days to do work, come back another day. The leader appears to be more concerned about observing the religious traditions and forms that are going on than it is to see a human being that is touched by God's Spirit. He seems to be, again, lost in the fact that this is about him. This is not about God and what God can do in the lives of others. Yeah.
Let's say we're in church. Somebody stands up, right? Whatever.
Yeah, and I think so, but I think also there's that fine line from, and it happens here all the time. I mean, it happens in our lives all the time. There are rules, and then there's times for the exceptions to rules.
He was preaching for the church, and he was told before he preached it, stay at the pole. So I asked about 2 things. The other guy out there in the crowd. There was some indignant people because he was broke. It was his message. So this leader of the synagogue, I don't know if it's about him. About tradition, rules, etc. So much you talk about just do the same thing.
Those of you online, Fran was mentioning that sometimes being a rule follower is what keeps order in our lives, I guess is the way you're putting that too, and that sometimes I'm not wording it well. Basically, I think for me, there are rules, but there's also times that the rules for the situation need to take a back seat. And so what I don't want us to miss on this is that Jesus has encountered this in every synagogue he's been in. This is not new for Jesus. It's one of the reasons he goes to the Mount of the Beatitudes to preach instead of in the synagogue. There are places where he has turned away from preaching and teaching in the synagogue. So while I agree with you, and again, I think you're right. If Scott got up during the middle of our worship service and started creating a disruption, I don't doubt there would be at least some attempt to clean. Right. Right.
He had the story.
Yeah. Well, I think we're getting in the weeds at this point with that. Yeah. And this is, I realize part of what it is the reality is Jesus is bucking the system at times. You saw clearly in the picture I took that was up there what was happening with that. No, just kidding with that. But it's, I think it's one of those things where sometimes processes and procedures can get in the way of ministry taking place. And I think that's where we try to do the best we can to be reasonable. We try to do the best we can. An example is we had a situation in one of our worship services where a mom came in and she had brought with her snacks for her children to have during worship and was told that we don't do that here. Now, obviously, it was not in the modern service. And basically was said, either get rid of the stuff or you can't stay here. That was in our sanctuary at our church. And the reality is exceptions need to be made. And
because, the story, some ailment, something went through, kind of drew her down. And it's that the synagogue leader is this crippled and narrow-minded, and distracted. He lost the whole concept of the place of worship. It became their rules, not God's.
right.
That's all it takes.
That's all it takes. Well, the leader has addressed the crowd. And the interesting thing is, and this is where I think the attitude comes in, is that this leader that's in there, I think, has several things. First of all, he tends to be passive aggressive at this point. He wants to give Jesus a message, but he's not willing to deal directly with Jesus. He tells the people what he wants Jesus to hear in Jesus's presence. And so instead of being upfront and honest and whatnot about it, and I think we all tend to do that. We tend to find ways for people to get the message without us specifically saying that to them. So we've got that going on. So he says something to the people in the presence of Jesus so Jesus can hear it. Instead of rejoicing with the woman's healing, the leader resents the hassle, it appears. You've disrupted something that's going on here. Going on to the 15th verse. But the Lord answered him and said, "You hypocrites, does not each of you on the Sabbath untie his ox or his donkey from the manger and lead it away to give it water?" So Jesus is pointing out something here, that the rabbis have the laws and the rules, but there's also that fine line of interpretation of the rule and how it's to be done on a Sabbath day. And so the interesting thing was they had a strong feeling about the proper care of animals. That was one of the things that rabbinic folks did, and the animals were not to be abused in any way. But the irony here is that this woman is bound, and she has been set free. And so it seems like implies that this Sabbath guy is more interested in keeping the rules than necessarily what has been the benefit to this woman. And then in the 16th verse, and ought not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, who Satan bound for 18 years, be set free from the bondage on this Sabbath day? First of all, this woman is a Jew. She is a part of Abraham's tradition and Abraham's flock. And she's probably used to being ignored in some ways. It was not unusual in the culture of the world for folks who had challenges to be ignored or to not be treated as normal. We don't have anything about the extended family that this woman has and how she's being cared for. Maybe she is doing very well, maybe she is not. And she, you know, has a challenge to even remember kind of what normal has been for her. So why would you not celebrate with that? And then in the 17th verse, he said, when he had said this, all of his opponents were put to shame, and the entire crowd was rejoicing at all the wonderful things that he, meaning Jesus, was doing. Those who are in leadership at this point, and I think some of us at times get kind of caught in the fact that what we have said or done maybe has been disruptive to someone else, maybe has been painful, you know, and we feel sorry for what we have done. And it appears that's what's happened in this case. Once this rejoicing starts taking place and the people get involved, maybe is the fact that maybe I didn't quite act. And I think that's even what happened here at this church in that instant I mentioned to you. And I don't know that there was shame involved, but at least there was remorse for how that had been handled by the individual that was involved. And so, you know, sometimes we feel shame. Sometimes we feel like maybe I didn't do as best I could on that. And so hopefully we rejoice when there's opportunity to do that. And there's a full restoration that takes place for this woman. It appears that the community has rallied around her. It appears that her faith has been made whole. It appears that full healing has taken place. And so each of us has an opportunity to live that out. It'll be interesting to see how Phil will unpack this on Sunday for us. Phil is in Philadelphia, or not Philadelphia, he's in St. Louis this morning for a meeting. We'll be back later tonight with that. He may be on Zoom. Is he on Zoom today? I don't think so. But anyway, it's a little early in St. Louis this morning.
I'm watching. I'm watching you.
Oh, you are? Good. Good. Well, hopefully we have done you well and didn't take your thunder, but also set up you well for Sunday morning. So good morning to you. Glad hope things are well in St. Louis.
They are. Thank you.
All righty. All right. So I put some questions on the table for you. Yes, sir. Well, the question was Brandon thought that Jesus wasn't allowed to teach in the synagogues. It pretty much, it was kind of like Paul and where Paul went. Sometimes he could, sometimes it was not acceptable. And so it was based on the setting. It was based on, you know, who was there, all those kinds of things. So I don't know that there was a rule that he could not. He was a rabbinic. And so, you know, he would have been a traveling preacher, so to speak, teacher with that. And even when he goes to the temple, he by tradition, he used the teaching steps that were on the outside of the temple for folks to use that too. So, all right. So around the tables, spend some time together and we'll come back together to finish up.